Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever live edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, aka GMAC, and it is time to talk about the highly interesting contest down in Georgia, taking place tonight against the by the New York Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks. You know, in the past, if I messed up on the intro, I would just re-record it, but this is what happens when we do it live. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for this live edition of the KFS pregame show. Talking about the Knicks taking on the Atlanta Hawks tonight. The Knicks come in at 3-3 after a pretty tough loss to the Houston Rockets, beat up a little bit in a game that was allowed to be a little more physical than we're used to. But hopefully a game against the Atlanta Hawks can turn some things around. The Hawks come in at 3-5 on the season. Some questionable defense. Obviously, they made a pretty big trade in the offseason. Very curious about what version of the Hawks we're about to see. Obviously, speaking of rivals and villains and things we've discussed in the past, somebody that will never get the popular vote here in New York, Trae Young. We'll see if he actually plays in this game tonight. He's suffering from an injury. I need to know about the Atlanta Hawks. It's the first time I'm seeing them this season. And joining me to talk about this Atlanta Hawks team from Hawks Fan TV. What's up, Alex? How you doing, my man?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me on the show, Andrew.
Of course, I am excited to talk about this Hawks team that looks very different than I've seen in the past. The biggest thing I'm curious about is like the state of the Hawks and coming into this. Obviously, the rivalry when the Knicks resurgence started 4 years ago under Tibbs, and that Julius Randle resurgent year, and then that first round series that the Hawks won in 5. And it looked like this is going to be a matchup between two teams that would be contending in the East. And I hope you don't mind me saying it hasn't seemed to have gone that way as much for the Hawks. Not that the Knicks 2 second-round exits or anything to talk about. So just kind of the state of the Hawks. Let's start with what happened in the offseason. The Dejounte and Trae experiment came to an end. Dejounte Murray was traded to the Pelicans. Your reaction to that trade when it happened?
Yeah, reaction was it needed to happen, right? Because if you've been following the Hawks closely, not everyone was bought in, and sadly Dejounte was one of them. I think when we brought him in, he was supposed to play like off ball, with that synergy with him and Trae, and really be used as like a primary POA defender for this squad, and he just refused to buy in. And I think a lot of Hawks fans, and myself included, when we made the initial trade, we were expecting like this all-NBA defender, because he does have technically one all-NBA defense under his resume. But I felt like that was a fluke season, and he refused to guard. Like, he refused to buy into the system. He refused to defend on the perimeter. And really, when he didn't have the ball in his hands, it kind of was just very lackadaisical. So I think the fit just wasn't good. Like, I appreciate the front office for trying to make that move, because on paper it should have worked. It just didn't work in reality. And, with that being said, it was time to turn a new leaf, Andrew. It was time to turn a new leaf and, reset from a backcourt perspective, which is what we did with the Pelicans trade. So all in all, I'm happy, man.
So the reset, it seems to have taken place with this trade. Is that what the majority of the fan base wanted? Like, was there any hint of buyer's remorse with the fact of what you gave up? You kind of have to see this through even further. I mean, obviously again, I'm not picking on you here. This is just the reality of where the Hawks are at the moment. But there is a reality, and I think the Clippers are dealing with this now too, that another team could potentially get a very high draft pick using the pick that they acquired from you for a player in this very loaded draft. Is like how is the fan base sorting through that? Or is it like, you know what, cut your losses, we moved on, and this is the team going forward?
Yeah, I think it's more so the latter, right? I think there was a small percentage of Hawks fans that were like diehard Dejounte Murray fans and just clinged on to him, which you're going to get in every fan base, right?
Right.
But the majority from my conversations have just been, hey, we're happy. We need a better backcourt fit with Trae, which Dyson Daniels has lived up to every single expectation that we had hoped for. And some might even argue that we won the trade with Dyson, and we still got those 2 first-round draft picks back. Dyson's having a career year. And he's been as every bit as good advertised from a defensive side of things, right? So leads the league in deflections, like top 5 in steals, top 10 or top 15 in blocks. So he's been great, and he's knocking down his threes. So that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, that kind of leads into some of the expectations for this year, because there's a team that was in the play-in last year, but you do have like some talent here. When we were making our preseason projections, some of our experts even went as far as to say this is the team that can leapfrog the Heat. There's like a 48-win team in this, and I'm very curious where Hawks fans are coming into this year. So if you want to tell me what your expectations are coming into this year, what a disappointing season for the Hawks looks like, what do you say?
Yeah, I think the expectations were, realistically, I don't think any Hawks fans really had us as like true contenders, right? And to be honest, I don't think there are any contenders outside of like one team in the East that like can really, really contend for a title this year. Sadly, because they're like the most hated team in my perspective that I hate the most, which are the Boston Celtics. But yeah, I mean, I think anywhere from a like 6 to a 10 seed is like the expectation. At the bare minimum, I think our floor is like 8, 9, or 10. But yeah, the ceiling could be like as high as a 6 seed, in my opinion. Like we started the season off well, 2-0 with a fully healthy squad. And then, of course, like DeAndre Hunter, who's always freaking injured every single year. He got hurt and he's missed every single game except for the first 2. Dyson Daniels has been in and out of the lineup. Bogey, our 6th man of the year candidate, he's been hurt all season. So yeah, it's been rough from an injury perspective. So we have us right where I expected. 3-5 seems about right given the injuries and a new players on this team.
So you actually spoke highly of the defense so far, and they're a bottom 6 in defensive rating so far. It's a 6-game sample or 8-game sample, so it's nothing to really make a judgment on. But are you satisfied with what the defense is? Is it? I know the Celtics, when as a Knicks fan, I can attest to this. Playing the Boston Celtics will ruin any type of defensive rating that you're trying to accomplish. But like, how have you been satisfied with what the defense has looked like so far, non-Celtics game related?
Yeah, non-Celtics game related, it goes back to the injuries. Like our 2 best defenders are literally DeAndre Hunter and Dyson Daniels. Dyson has missed 2 games out of the 8 so far. DeAndre Hunter has missed 6 out of the 8 so far. So when you eliminate kind of 2 of your key main POA defenders, Onyeka Okongwu, who's a great defender, he's missed like every other game with the toe injury. So it's been sad. The defense right now is bad because we're missing those guys. And I don't expect it to get better anytime soon until like we get a fully healthy squad.
So as we transition a little bit to the Knicks of it all, this game, who's playing tonight? I know Trae is probable was the last listing, but to the Knicks fan that is unaware, like, are we seeing Daniels come back tonight or DeAndre Hunter come back tonight? This is again to the Knicks fan that is unaware of what happened. Like, who can the Knicks expect on the court tonight?
Yeah, Dre's not playing. DeAndre Hunter will definitely not be playing. Trae is probable. He left the Celtics game on Monday due to like a rib injury, but all indication is saying that he's going to play. It wasn't too serious. Dyson Daniels is like a game time decision because he's kind of missed every other game, sort of. What seems like ever since like game 3 or 4. I'm hoping he can play because I'm assuming he's going to be the primary assignment for Jalen Brunson. So. Onyeka, he's also game time decision. He's been kind of battling in and out of injuries with his toe. So yeah, it might be slim, but we'll see we'll see what happens, right?
So you think they'd put Dyson Daniels on Brunson tonight if he plays?
I mean, yeah, I'm assuming so. I haven't really kept up too much with the Knicks outside of that first game in the season opener. So I don't even know like your starting 5.
Yeah. I figured that would be this is where I'm going to ask you about some matchups, some coverage things, because I went and watched a little bit of the Celtics game, and it's tough to really gauge anything from a game against the Celtics. Like, oh, they're really good, but it was more to see how the Celtics were being guarded. And I guess the personnel may dictate what Snyder went to there, but there's a lot of, Capella in drop, hiding Trae, which is nowhere really to hide him on the Celtics side of things. but I assume Trae Young would be guarding Josh Hart tonight. But like with someone with guys like Hunter, like Daniels, I assume they could switch a little more. But do you see them potentially playing a little bit of like playing drop coverage against the Knicks with what their personnel currently dictates on the team?
Yeah, they might. Like if we're missing Dre, who's probably would be like the best matchup for someone like a Anunoby or a Bridges type of player. So him being gone is certainly going to hurt us quite a bit. But yeah, we do have other like switchable defenders, right? Like Dyson Daniels can guard, 1 through 3, sometimes even 4. Clint Capella, obviously he's limited, but and then Jaylen Johnson is just an absolute stud, so he can switch pretty much 1 through 5. So yeah, it's going to be tough. Just looking at like the rotations that you guys had against the Rockets, like yeah, Trae's going to be on Josh Hart is my best bet. Dyson on Jalen Brunson. Clint's going to be on Cat. Jalen's going to be on probably Anunoby, and then and then Zaccharie Risacher is going to be on Bridges. So yeah, I think the matchups fairly well because Jaylen, Risacher are pretty solid defenders still in their own right. So I think they could give potentially Anunoby and Bridges some problems.
That's a softball you just lobbed up for me to ask about Risacher, the first pick and the number one pick in the most recent NBA draft that the Hawks won the lottery to. Just quick side note, how did you feel about this being the number one pick that the Hawks eventually got, jumping all the way, I believe from the 12th pick or the 13th pick, jumping up to number one?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact placing we were at. I just remember we had a 3% chance to land the number 1 seed.
Right.
Because there were a lot. Like I know the Hawks did bad last season. Like we were garbage, but we were still a play-in team, and there were a number of other teams that did significantly worse than us. So the fact that we got it, that was cool. But of course, in true Atlanta fashion, it just happened to be a draft where it was very underwhelming. There wasn't a Wemby type of prospect. There was no Zion or anything like that, which was unfortunate for us. But yeah, I think Risacher, for what he can do for his skill set, I think he was the better pick. And like Alex Sarr, in the few games that I've seen him this season, and then also like in summer league and preseason, he doesn't look very good. And he thinks he's like a shooting guard by all those threes he takes. So I don't think he would have really fit that well with this team.
Yeah. I think the curiosity I have from a Knicks perspective tonight is they've just been murdering teams that play drop on them. The 3 games they've lost this year are, I mean, the Celtics, I guess qualify here, but everybody's losing to the Celtics except this one game against the Pacers. But they lost to the Cavs, they lost to the Rockets, a couple of switch heavy teams with elite. Well, I mean, Mobley being an elite rim protector, but those are very physical teams that are able to really give the Knicks some problems. And then the Pistons, the Heat, and the Pacers are teams that deploy a drop, and that's where going into this, I'm a bit more confident, and that's why I'm curious if Risacher or if Daniels and Hunter, and you said Dre won't play tonight, so I guess if Daniels is able to return tonight, is he able to shake things up a little bit? But yeah, I'm curious if the Knicks can keep up the pattern that they've had lately, and they've looked like an elite offense against certain teams. It's just they're still figuring things out 7 games into the season. The question I would have for you next, and if it's okay, I'm going to go to my audience for a little bit, or in a little bit, I should say. But your thoughts on the Knicks, and I know where you come from in the Hawks fan TV verse. I know where the Twitter wars have begun. Shout out to Sean with a W, who introduced us in the first place. I know that you've had a reputation for your thoughts on the Knicks in the past, but like they've been touted as a contender by a lot of pundits and a lot of experts out there, especially after the 2 trades that they made this offseason. So I ask you, Alex of Hawks Fan TV, what was your reaction to the 2 trades they made this offseason? And then do you buy it? Are the Knicks a contender in the sense of like they're like a top 3 seed, or should be considered one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, so first and foremost, shout out to my man Sean with the W. Shout out to Sed, cool people's over there. But yeah, I think the Knicks definitely, like it sucks to say because I'm a Hawks fan, but yeah, I think the Knicks from a Eastern Conference perspective would be a top 3, top 4 team in the East for sure. Just because, yeah, I don't see that many good teams in the East. Like the Hawks being one of those teams, like we're just not that good. I mean, maybe things can turn around if we're fully healthy, but yeah, I think the Knicks are a top 3 team in terms of the trade, like with Cat and Bridges. It was obviously like your front office saying it's kind of do or die. I think your front office realized the East as a whole is pretty weak. And so like it's now or never. So I commend the Knicks front office for actually doing some stuff. I know in years past, like the majority of Knicks fans would, argue and complain about like, oh, we have all this draft capital, we have all these things, but we never make a move. And it looks like you guys finally did. I really like the Cat trade first and foremost. I think he brings a different element to this team offensively. And we all know what Cat can do. He can space the floor. He can score down low, yada, yada, yada. The only concern I have with Cat is, of course, his heart, right? Is he tough? Is the mental toughness there? And maybe Tom Thibodeau and the rest of the Knicks squad can maybe talk some sense to him. But from what I've seen over his career, he's a very soft player. So maybe come postseason time, that could be a slight hindrance. But the skill's there, right? Like I can't knock the skill. One of the best bigs in the game in terms of just scoring wise. So that was a great move. Bridges. Also, that was very unexpected. I just had no idea that the Nets were going to trade off of him because they had so many other offers in years past, and they just, for some reason, refused to tank and rebuild. So that was interesting. In the few games that I've seen Bridges, it looks like his scoring isn't there, or maybe that was just the few games I've seen him. It looks like his shot had a hitch to it, and he just wasn't the type of shooter that we saw in Brooklyn. So I'm curious to see if that's been fixed, if he's scoring a lot now. But all in all, it definitely makes the Knicks better. But I don't think it puts them in contention status. I think really only the Celtics from the East are true contenders.
And that's the tiers of it all. If you think that the Cavs, who haven't lost yet, if that continues, then they're in the, you respect that they're 8-0, right? But
yeah,
I don't know if we put them in the tier yet. Maybe this is a postseason conversation. If it's a tier of 2 and it's Boston and OKC, that's understood. So just to respond to the couple things, Mikal Bridges is flirting with a 62 true shooting so far this year. To give you the most recent update on his jump shot, I've noticed a hitch, but it hasn't necessarily affected his shooting as much. He had a bad preseason and a bad first half against Boston, and then everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, they traded 5 picks for a guy with a broken jump shot," and since then he's just been lights out. So that I'm curious if that continues tonight. Watch, I say all of this, and he's gonna go 2 for 14 tonight against the Hawks. And then the Cat thing is interesting because I gotta be honest, I've had the same reservations about Cat in the past too, about is he soft? Is he tough enough? The Jimmy Butler of it all. Also, just ask a Timberwolves fan. They'll have the same frustrations with him. He seems to have gained a lot of respect from the fan base for the Denver series and how he not shut down Jokic, but just guarded Jokic straight up. So that way, McDaniels and Gobert could do other things around him. And then the Dallas series happened where he really didn't play that poorly. He just shot poorly, which I guess can lead to you saying he played poorly. But his shooting slump in that series lost. I mean, I know they lost in 5, but those first 3 games were 1 possession games going into the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. So much so that the first 2 games they had the lead in the final minute of the fourth quarter. So when the Knicks got him, I was like, so the all-in move was for Cat. Okay. Understanding the spacing and the stretch 5 of it all. I still is this the guy that, like you said, the playoff expectation that now gets put on this team with the all-in nature of that they've gone in? I have the same questions. I will say so far, there is a level of toughness that I maybe just from not watching enough Timberwolves games that I hadn't seen. He had 9 offensive rebounds the other night against a very physical Houston team on a night the refs were just allowing things to happen. And the 44 he dropped on Miami last Wednesday was, I mean, you want to win my heart over, do something against the Miami Heat. So him doing that on Bam and Jimmy for a night was a step in the right direction toward me.
Bam and Jimmy stink anyways. So.
Well, listen, maybe, but I still like it when my players do something to both of them in Miami. So I'll take it. But I agree with you. He's going to eventually have to beat those allegations in the playoffs, which he's well on his way to at least beating them in the regular season and in his first couple games with the Knicks. Before we get to the Mount Rushmore question, do you mind if we go to a couple of questions from the Knicks Film School audience listening or just watching along? Again, thank you everybody for tuning in to the first ever live edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. Let's go to a Knicks Film School staple. Here is Busy. Does the Atlanta fan base still believe in Trae?
Yeah, I think for the most part we do. He's the only reason, or like 90% of the reason why we're even close in most of these games or why we win. His playmaking, his ability to just get to the line and score and play make, I think is one of the best in the league, despite how a lot of Knicks fans feel about him, right? Like whether he's a flopper or he's an efficient shot chucker, whatever.
Oh, I've moved on. No, hold on. We've moved on. We have Jalen Brunson now. We respect the foul baiting and the craft of being able to draw contact, while admitting I will be very upset when Trae does it tonight, but then applaud Jalen when he does it on the other end.
Yeah. I'm glad you can admit it. Admitting is the first step because, Jalen definitely has that in his repertoire as well. But yeah, I mean, Trae leads the league in assists, most total assists, I think assists per game right now. And I think he's still like top 10 in scoring as well. So yeah, I mean, he's just like a all-in-one offensive machine. And it's unfortunate that the Hawks ownership and front office refuse to spend money. Like we have never gone into luxury tax in the Trae Young era. We have never used our mid-level exception to invest in good players. So from what we've seen, I'm not calling the Hawks front office and ownership cheap, but the evidence would argue otherwise, because ever since the new ownership took over, pretty much like a year before Trae got drafted, we've never spent money. Like we've never been a top 15 payroll team in the league, yada, yada, yada. I could go on. So I think the front office and the ownership have failed to do like a really good job, like providing pieces around Trae and the right pieces. I think we're stepping in the right direction. But yeah, in years past, it just hasn't been there. Like when you look at all these other star players, hell, when you even look at Jaylen Brunson and what their organization is doing to put pieces around, like Trae's the only like all-star player that has yet to ever play with a all-NBA teammate. He's never played with a all-NBA defender. And he's never, he's only had a one-time all-star in Dejounte Murray as his best, as his best teammate from a talent perspective, right? And the year that DJ made the all-star, it was as a replacement. So, I'm not going to dive too much into that, but like that's the caliber of talent that this Hawks ownership and front office has surrounded Trae. Like he's never had that elite level kind of Robin next to him. We're hoping Jaylen Johnson can be that because we drafted him and he's making all the strides to become that borderline all-star player. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the Joel Embiids of the world and all the all-star teammates he's had and, all NBA defenders, when you look at all these other players, Luka getting Kyrie, yada, 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 Trae's never had that. So he's kind of been a one-man band ever since he's entered the league. And I think a lot of people will take like team record into account, but he's pretty much doing everything. We saw it in the Miami Heat series. All they had to do was double and blitz Trae, and there's no other player on this team that could handle the ball or create for themselves. So it's been rough. I still think the majority of the fan base believes in him, but I would also say we would be understanding if, let's say we do bad this season, we're another play-in team, we don't make the playoffs. Like I would understand if Trae were to ask out, and so that way he can, live out his prime on an actual contender. And I wouldn't blame him for doing that because we failed to invest and put the right pieces around him.
I know you said you don't want to call the Hawks front office cheap, Alex, but it sounds to me like you're calling the front office of the ownership of the Atlanta Hawks cheap. If I could just decipher that from what you were saying right there, which
I'll let you hear what you want to hear. I'm not saying they're cheap. I'm just simply saying they've never, I'm presenting the data. That's all I'm doing. Right. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, this is the applause we're all giving the Knicks front office. I get that they've gone all in. You can have your reservations about Karl-Anthony Towns. They have now created a ceiling around their best player. They've surrounded him with a ton of wing depth and wing defense to, just to plug in place. Like if you were going to build a team around Trae Young, it's like somebody like an OG Anunoby or a Mikal Bridges would probably be the thing to do. And then so this is where the tough question comes in, because I know we're both going to be biased for our own guys, but the fun Twitter back and forth of who's better, which I think there's just like a tier that exists and we can say that all these guys are great. But like I would argue Jalen Brunson has graduated to a different tier than Trae at this point. And I'm sure you would argue the opposite. I wonder if there isn't just like that style of build, though, is what the Hawks will eventually need to do with this new ownership, with this Landry Fields in charge. Once a Knick, always a Knick. And what you're looking for, maybe that's what the Dyson Daniels and DeAndre Hunter thing could potentially be, is like a light version of what the Knicks are building over here. No?
Yeah, potentially for sure. Yeah, Jalen Brunson has definitely been a really good player ever since he came to the Knicks. He surprised me, in all honesty. Like I didn't think he would be as good as he is currently. With that said, Andrew, I don't think he's certainly not a tier above Trae. Like I think that's almost asinine.
Let me make it clear. When I say a tier, I mean like there are tiers of players that like there's like the ranking of it all is unnecessary. Like there's like the first tier and then the second tier. You could say like they're both in the same tier. Who's better is irrelevant,
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Brunson's still good. He's still a great player. So yeah, I won't dive too much into like the whole Trae Brunson debate. I think what we all can agree on though is like Halliburton is nowhere near either of those two players. Because I know that's what like the national media was trying to push with Hallie like being an elite point guard in the East, blah blah blah. But
it's the craziest thing about this season so far is the victory lap that a lot of people that never believed in Halliburton are now able to take because of how bad of a start he's gotten off to. So as someone who may or may not also be emotionally invested in his downfall, I can understand if we're sharing in that sentiment,
Yeah, like he's still a good player. Don't get me wrong. Halliburton's a good player.
No,
he's just not. He's like not at the same level of a Brunson or a Trae Young or any of those guys. He's not even better than LaMelo Ball in my opinion. But that's a topic.
We have graduated to spicy here on the pregame show, Alex. I appreciate that. Couple other questions from Manny Campos. Do you think if the Hawks build a good enough defense around Trae around Trae to eventually make a finals? I think there is I think there are steps here that you have to get to, but proceed, Manny. Can Trae be the best player on a team that makes the finals?
I think he can. Like I think we were 2 games away from making a finals appearance a few years back, and we beat the number 1 seeded 76ers on the road in Game 7. Like we took the Bucks, who were the NBA champions, to 6 games. And a lot of people want to forget, but like Trae got hurt in that series. He missed a game and then he came back with a damn near sprained ankle the following game. But if that ref never had his foot there, like who knows what would have happened? Like Trae was cooking the Bucks. We all saw what Trae did to Milwaukee in Game 1 on the road in the ECF, like 48 points and 12 assists, something like that. So yeah, I think he definitely can be. It's just, again, a matter of the right pieces around him. Like no player, I don't remember any player in the history of the NBA ever winning a title or even making a finals in the NBA with no other all-star teammate. Like even the year LeBron James went to the finals in his early days with Cleveland, like he still had a Mo Williams, who I think was an all-star that year, and players like that. We've never had 2 all-stars in the same team at the same time. So it's going to be tough. Like you can't win without talent. Like, yeah, chemistry is important. Like the right personnel is important, but at the end of the day, like talent wins games. Like, can you get me a bucket when Trae is, triple teamed at half court? Can you make the right defensive plays? Can you, self-create, etc.? And we just haven't had that. Again, I'm super high on Jaylen Johnson. I think he could be that, but it's still, again, too early to tell. And we'll see what Jaylen Johnson can do. But if a lot of Knicks fans aren't aware of Jaylen Johnson, I think you guys will get introduced to him tonight at the game.
Yeah, that's a bad job by me. We're 31 minutes into this, and I haven't mentioned Jaylen Johnson. The Knicks Film School audience has absolutely heard us mention him, both me and some of the other hosts, speaking glowingly about him, what he could potentially be. I just recently did some trivia at my second home at the Sam Vecini Game Theory with Sam Vecini, and it turns out Jaylen Johnson is one of the 10 players this season averaging more than 15 points and more than 10 rebounds a game this year. There, I believe, is 22 players averaging at least 10 rebounds, and he's one of the 10 averaging at least 15 points. So this is a guy that's getting boards as well as, getting points this season. Josh Hart on that list of 10 rebounds, not there at 15 points yet, around 11, or I believe 13 or 14 actually for Josh Hart. But this is I mean, I don't know if he can be necessarily the second guy, but like if he ends up being the third guy and then that second guy gets traded for, which leads to my next question from Ben Kim Gervey. If the Hawks were to spend money, what two players or player types would you potentially like it to spend on? What are the missing pieces?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think every like championship caliber team needs like an elite wing player too, for sure. So ultimately try to replace a DeAndre Hunter with a really high level two-way wing, whoever that may be. Maybe Risacher could be that, but again, he's a rookie. We just don't know what we have in him. But yeah, I think that would certainly be one. And then a better freaking center, right? Like Clint Capella just is not it. Clint Capella is doing better than what he has been in previous years because he kind of regressed a lot last year. But yeah, Clint Capella, like in today's modern day, in my opinion, you kind of need a more versatile five, in my opinion, right? So like someone who can potentially space the floor, someone who can, pass out of the low block and just do all these things other than just simply protect the rim and block shots right at the rim. He's not very good on the perimeter as a defender. So really his only main asset is rebounding and rim protection. Onyeka Okongwu could be that, but again, he's a little undersized at 6'9", and he's also injured a lot. So our 6th overall draft pick a few years ago in Onyeka Okongwu, he just hasn't really lived up to the expectations either. And that's tough. Like you have to have some homegrown talent. Like you have to draft well and let these players develop. And outside of Trae and Jaylen, we haven't had many players that we drafted super high that have actually developed into a player that is respectable. Like DeAndre Hunter, always hurt. He didn't live up to the expectations. Cam Reddish, Knicks fans, you all know what happened with Cam Reddish. We took him number 10 overall the same year we took DeAndre Hunter at number 4 overall. Right, Onyeka Okongwu hasn't really lived up to expectations. Like, I mean, the list can go on and on. So, yeah, I think a 3 and a 5 to improve the team would be the best chance for us to really make a deep run. So, yeah, we'll see. Jaylen Johnson could be a 3. Like, I actually think he would be better suited at 3. But because we have no power forward on this roster outside of like a 31-year-old Larry Nance Jr., he kind of has to be the de facto 4. But I've always said I think he's best suited at the small forward position.
Is there any world where Risacher can develop into that? What are your projections for him?
Yeah, I think he can. And, he struggled this year shooting-wise. Like his 3-ball has been incredibly inefficient all season so far to start. But his defense is there. He's savvy. He's poised, and that shows because he was a professional player overseas. So, like, he's good at getting to the rim, getting contact, et cetera, et cetera. But, yeah, his 3-ball is really the main thing that, like, hasn't lived up to the expectations. He's had a number of wide-open threes all season, and he's just not able to convert. I think he's shooting, like, 30% from 3 right now. So he could be, again, like I said in the beginning of the show, but we just don't know yet.
Well, time will tell. And look, the reality is that, like you said, you need stars in this league, and there may be a second star that the Hawks need to go get. If not like a 5 and a 3, maybe just one other player. And this is where the second to last question I'll ask you. Who is the player that Hawks fans are clamoring for ownership to pursue? Is there one guy that you've had or that Hawks fans have had on their mind that's like, oh, if we trade for blank, then we got a squad, and this is from Stan Brad 13.
That's a tough question, Stan. Very tough question. Like my ultimate pipe dream and just to have some fun with it,
Yeah,
would
say
be
it.
a player. It would be like a Giannis, obviously. Like I don't think we
So
have the
them getting into the
assets.
Giannis sweepstakes, now that the Knicks have cashed all their chips in, potentially.
Exactly. Like
Okay.
a Giannis would be like the ideal prototype player to pair with Trae Young, just because I think like a 1-4, 1-5 pick and roll with him and Giannis would be just unstoppable. He could lob it up to Giannis for an easy dunk. He can shoot the floater. So I think that would be really exciting. Zion Williamson, when healthy, also would be a really good really cool player to play with. But it's hard to tell. Like I don't think we're one player away. Like I think we're a couple of pieces away, and our depth just isn't there, especially with all the injuries that we have. So yeah, it's not just like one ultimate player. Also, like as much as I hate the guy, he's skilled enough to like elevate this team. Like a Joel Embiid next to Trae, like a big man that can space the floor, that can shoot threes, and also create down low for himself would be really nice. And Joel, he needs someone like Trae, right? He needs an alpha that's going to push him to the next level, because Joel, he can't produce in the postseason. He's soft. So that way, I feel like if Trae took him under his wing, he'd be able to kind of get that dog out of him.
I want Knicks fans to rewind and re-listen to what Alex said, that he did clarify pipe dream before he then said, yeah, Joel Embiid and Giannis. Those are the guys I would love for the Hawks to trade for, because I get it. Like that's where the Knicks were for a long time with like, what's the pipe dream that we're going to cash all these chips in and use the New York media and the New York bias and the CAA influence. And it turned out Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns were the chips they were going to eventually cash in for. So I definitely get it.
Andrew, I just have to step in there. There's a chat that I saw from Justin Cole. He was a lifelong Hawks fan, and then now he's slowly converting to become a Knicks fan. Justin, if you're listening, don't do that. Right? You can still ride with the squad in Atlanta. There is light at the end of the tunnel, Justin. Just remember, it might not be this season, it might not be next season, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. So, yeah.
So I will say, Justin is saying it's our fault that he said he's converting to the Knicks due to Knicks Film School, due to KFS. Seriously, watch almost every post game and see some OGs here. Obviously, he's referring to Busy and Jessica and Dom. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, by the way. So I apologize that we're slowly converting the rest of the NBA into Knicks fans with our coverage here, Alex. It's not our intention, but it is a nice perk for what we're doing.
I respect it, Andrew. You guys do good work over there. And like, contrary to popular belief, like, yeah, I know I joke on the Knicks and this and that, but I was actually born in New York. I don't know if many people know that. I was born in Manhattan. New York is still one of my favorite places to visit. So I have nothing against the Knicks or New York as a whole. One of my favorite cities to visit. Like, for the record, the only teams I hate in the NBA would be quite literally the Raptors and the Celtics. Like those are the only two teams I genuinely dislike. And it pains me to say that, Andrew, because the Raptors are so irrelevant and they've been so bad, and Kawhi saved them that one fluke year. But it's really the fan base from the Raptors. They act like they're the Lakers. They act like they're the Celtics, but they had that one fluke year and they think they're on top of the world ever since then.
Yeah, the Raptors have become like our buddy cop movie, like our spinoff show for the Knicks because of the RJ and Quickly trade. So when we want to go watch these two younger players that can now go to an environment where like their development is first and foremost and winning is secondary, not to say they can't eventually become players on a winning team, which they were here in New York, but now they're like, RJ has been balling so far this year, regardless of their record. You could just acknowledge his individual performances. And that's why I'm able to go watch my spinoff TV show known as the Toronto Raptors, the Knicks North, as we call them. But I appreciate you saying that about Knicks Film School and New York in general. It seems like from the first time that we first got introduced to each other, there's been a lot of healing here, Alex, that over the years, there's some back and forth in the Trae and the Knicks series of it all. But I feel like we've really come a long way here with the Hawks Fan TV and the Knicks Film School relationship. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to like KFS and you and Sean, there's never been any like bad blood, right? Like, I mean, Sean, as you know, Sean was the one that introduced us, and me and Sean are boys. I think it was just a lot of the outside Knicks fans and Hawks fans going at it. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some people on my poop list on Twitter, because there's just like a handful of Knicks fans that will always at me and search my tweets. and talk bad about the Hawks any chance they can get. But it's okay. Like, every successful person or platform is going to have haters. So I welcome them all.
So what's funny is you mentioned pulling up old tweets, and that's very much a Sean with a W move. So like the receipt pulling of Sean W is unparalleled, thankfully. I'm going to test how much healing has been done because the Knicks Film School account, which is Jonathan Macri, who I'm positive doesn't know how to log into his own account, so we sent it from the Knicks Film School account. I would just like to say, here's a $5 super chat. Thank you, John. I would just like to say I hope nobody gets hurt. Let's test how much healing has been done, Alex.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yes, the infamous. It happened what seems like forever ago. So I don't remember the exact situation that what the context was. But yes, there was a player that got hurt.
I can provide it if you want.
Yes, please.
So Knicks fans will remember this portion of the season, but Jalen Brunson's first year in New York. There was at a moment in the season where we thought Tibbs was getting fired. A lot of players were struggling. RJ Barrett in particular was having an awful year that year. And it was tough to see like the Knicks' best roster, best lineup was probably with RJ sitting and quickly playing instead. And Tibbs then made a rotation change. And the second game after that rotation change was against the Hawks. And during that game in the second quarter, RJ ran into Dejounte and he hurt his ankle. And Dejounte left the game, came out, and Jonathan Macri in his discussion of recap of the game in his monologue went, that's actually RJ had an okay game. Obviously he's been struggling lately, and in fact, it was him that hurt Dejounte. It was a good job, RJ, as if to say you finally contributed in a joking way. And I then jumped on hey, let's clarify that we don't actually think he did a good job by hurting Dejounte Murray. And then the way social media works, the clip without me on camera got passed around and made it in front of you. And that's why I'm testing how much healing has been done. And our offensive comments, which have no other offensive comments have ever been said by Knicks Film School here on our live formats, made its way in front of you. And we'll see if time truly has healed this wound, Alex.
I don't know if did he ever formally apologize and clarify himself?
Alex, he apologized seconds later. Later in the video, he apologized.
All right, yeah, in true social media fashion, it was just that little clip that someone posted on the internet that I saw. So I accept the apology.
We did it. Yes, we did it. 3 years later, we have healed this thing, ladies and gentlemen.
I agree. I hope no one gets hurt tonight. You never wish injury on anyone. And Joel Embiid, if you're listening, I don't even wish you to get hurt. It's just you put yourself in those positions and you do it to yourself. So just stop flopping, Joel, and maybe you won't get hurt so much.
You are winning over a lot of people in the Knicks Film School audience now, because this transitioned perfectly into our last question. I know we run a little bit long, so we'll make this one quick, but the Mount Rushmore question this year is inspired by one Joel Embiid. And again, we are not doing what the Philadelphia Inquirer did. We're talking about on the court, as a basketball player. Nothing else is being mentioned because we're more intelligent about how we talk trash. But the Mount Rushmore of villains, not the rivals, not the 4 teams you look forward to, but the 4 boogeyman, the 4 franchise killers. Obviously Trae Young became one for a series. And then the national media was Trae Young owns the Garden, even though hasn't necessarily won a lot of regular seasons there. He won the games that mattered in New York in the playoffs. I'll ask you, who are the 4 boogeymen or coaches or whatever, the 4 biggest villains to Atlanta Hawks fans?
The 4 biggest villains. Number 1 might be, it's a combination of Lloyd Pierce and Nate McMillan, our former coaches.
Okay.
Right? Heavy emphasis on Lloyd Pierce because he just, no one liked him from what I heard, right? I'm not saying I didn't like him. I'm just saying from what I've heard, the players didn't mesh well. He didn't take feedback well. And he was the main person advocating for Trae not to make all-star games because he had a personal bias against him. I think Lloyd Pierce is up there for me. Player-wise, as much as I hate to say it, because he doesn't hurt us in the sense of postseason success, but like Joel Embiid is up there for me because in the regular season he gives us problems, but more importantly, he's a liability to hurt our players. So his playing style, his flopping, him jumping, diving on the floor, sometimes can hurt players. I mean, I'm sure Knicks fans can attest to this. In the postseason, he tried to hurt Mitchell Robinson, and like that's just the type of player he is. He plays with zero class, zero respect. And yeah, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. So he, in that sense, he's definitely a boogeyman because he can hurt us in that aspect. Not from his play style or skill, but from that standpoint. Third would have to be. Oh God, this is tough. Like historically, like I don't even know who else would I lump in those last four.
Can I ask about Luka? Like, does that ever still come up? The Luka Trae stuff?
Honestly, like within Hawks fans, I haven't heard that in like 2 years. Like, yeah, you'll still see like Twitter trolls like still mention like, oh, Atlanta lost a trade like every once in a while. But that doesn't really come up anymore. But speaking of Luka, you could put him up there simply because he had his career high against us last season when, of course, Dejounte Murray was on the team. But yeah, he dropped 73 against us, and that was a career high for him. That was crazy. I think he was the only maybe one of two players last season to have 70 or more points in a single game. It
could be him, the only Book, one. And I think Embiid got to 70 once last year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he was one of three players, and of course that happened to my Hawks. So he would be one, and then the last one, I don't know. I'm trying to think. This is just my personal bias, but kind of similar in the Joel Embiid bucket. Kyle Lowry is one of my most hated NBA players. Okay. He's a poor man's Chris Paul. He rode the coattails of Kawhi and Pascal on the way to that ring. Doesn't deserve it. One of the most overrated players ever. I hate that I'm talking about him because his career and his basketball skill does not warrant for me to bring him up out of nowhere. But he's also one of those players that can hurt you guys from a physical standpoint because he has no respect for the game. He plays with zero class. He flops. He'll try to hurt players, and I just don't respect that. He hurt us when he was on the 76ers. He hurt us when he was on the Heat. He would throw his elbows and shove Trae in the throat and neck, and I don't like that.
There was a play last year where in the playoff series against the Sixers where Jaylen Brunson falls, like he was on the ground, and Lowry intentionally like trips over him from behind the 3-point line and throws the ball at the rim and gets credit for 3 free throws. And that stood in my mind forever and probably will forever of like, that's Kyle Lowry. Like there's less, it's like, that's technically a smart basketball play because it earned three free throws. It's just not the way I would personally want to. And what's funny is Jaylen Brunson like said in the moment, like, all right, you got me. Like I respect it, but you're going to talk about healing. You're going to gain a lot of popularity here in the Knicks Film School world to calling Kyle Lowry and Joel Embiid rivals and villains and boogeymen.
I can't even say that word, especially with Kyle Lowry, because he's not good enough to be a villain or a rival. But yeah, he's in my opinion one of the most irrelevant players to somehow become irrelevant or to become relevant in the NBA landscape. And like I said, like he needs to owe his life to Kawhi Leonard for getting that ring for him.
Gotcha. Well, I don't know where Trae Young ranks in the Knicks Mount Rushmore of villains anymore. Like time has gone by since then, and I know that playoff series was kind of epic, but I mean, Julius Randle turned into a pumpkin to an extent, which, I mean, it helps when your entire Hawks defensive game plan was let's just stop him and this house of cards will fall, and it worked. We'll see if that rivalry is renewed to an extent, if Trae plays tonight against the Knicks, and if the Knicks, maybe these two teams match up in like a 2-7 in the playoffs, or I'll be even more optimistic. You said a disappointing season would be like, or expectations for this season are like the 6 seed. Maybe this is the 3-6 this year. So we'll see what happens. Alex, thank you so much for joining me here on the Knicks Film School pregame show. I appreciate you doing this with me live as well. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home, all Knicks fans, know where they can find you and all of your stuff.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Andrew. You can find us at HawksFanTV on X and Instagram, and then HawksFanTV.com for all of our game coverage on our website. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun game tonight. Hopefully everyone stays healthy, no one gets hurt, and I'm excited to see where we end up at the end of the season. So the East is wide open, and hopefully some magic can happen for both of us.
Indeed. The Knicks are down every bench player, it feels like, with Campaign now being questionable, but he just missed the game. No Mitchell Robinson, no Landry Shamet, no Precious Achiuwa. So I very much hope that nobody gets hurt in this game for the New York Knicks, at least. And I will extend said well wishes to the Hawks from a health perspective. I hope you lose by 40. But I hope from a health perspective, I hope everybody makes it out of this game alive tonight.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Alex, thank you again for joining me. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it and you're listening, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching with us live, please like the video. If you're watching on replay, please like the video. Remember to subscribe. I will be back on Friday, recorded, so this will just be an upload to preview the Knicks matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon.